If you're curious to hear a little music from our guest Carla Lucero, who we spoke to in our most recent episode, check out E4TT's annual concert of music by women and non-binary composers, Midnight Serenades, on January 25th. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our Da Capo Conversations, a mini-series where we'll be giving familiar segments a topical twist. Today, we revisit Elinor Armour's and Pamela Z's perspectives on being a woman in a field that is so often male-dominated. Here's what Elinor Armour had to say.
I never have really thoroughly answered that question for anybody, but now that you ask me, I'm remembering when I first started working at the conservatory, which was in 1969, it didn't occur to me that being a woman was a part of the picture, you know. And also, I wasn't particularly high profile at that time, and the women's movement had really not begun. But as I continued to work there, a few years in, I was hired at UC Berkeley also to teach harmony and musicianship for a couple of years, for 1 year. I wasn't rehired because I didn't have a PhD, but anyway, I did not quit the conservatory. I remained after that. And then, of course, at that point, I was into teaching in the collegiate division. And then we got a graduate division as well. And then I founded the composition department at the conservatory in the mid-'80s. And by that time, one's gender was a matter of discussion and, politics and so on. And as I saw that happening, and I moved in on the wave of the women's movement, which came to music later than it came to a number of other subjects, I began to see that I was being noticed as a woman in the field of composition, even in composition teaching as well, and as such, I did not become militant. I just continued doing what I was doing, but it raised my consciousness to the point that I wanted very definitely to be a role model for other women and younger women, and to try to get more women applicants to the composition department. And indeed, in our first years, we had as high as 50% of our applicants being women. It comes and goes very much as the women's movement does, the same as any other so-called movement. It's not a movement anymore. It's simply a fact. And I'm very happy to have been a part of that. It was actually during the 80s that my partner and I had a family, and this was very celebrated by everybody at the conservatory. Our first child was born just before a faculty meeting. So I called in, said, I can't come to the faculty meeting because Donna has just had our first child. And the President Murdoch at the time announced this to the faculty, and everybody applauded. And they were all happy. I have to say, one of the things I am most grateful for in my whole life's trajectory is my long relationship with the conservatory, because I really grew up with them. My own self-awareness and my own career and my own output and so on are completely parallel with the growth and development of the conservatory. So I haven't even left yet. You know, I'm getting into my old age, and the conservatory is just coming of age. So, with all of its fine new building and new programs and so on, I'm very thrilled to be a part of it. You know, I was educated at Mills College, which when I was a student was really a center, a very, very exciting center of musical activity and innovation for the Bay Area. And since that time, the conservatory has become that. So I tend to go where the action is.
Here's what Pamela Z had to say.
Well, I can say that as somebody who's been doing this for many, many decades, people are wrong if they try to tell you that there hasn't been any change or that there's no. It's certainly not over. It's just like, you know, people who thought, oh, racism is over because Obama was president. You know, it's like, it's certainly not fixed. It's not done. But, oh, it is so much different. That it's so much more. I can say that when I first started doing this, I would just the stereotyping of, like, you know, like I used to walk into when I was playing in clubs all the time. I would walk in with my gear, and somebody who was there would see me come in and say, "Oh, you're the musician? You must do reggae." And I'd be like, "No, I don't." You know, and the other thing that I would get is I would set up all of my gear myself, because for years I've been pretty much for my entire career, I've been pretty independent and doing all of this stuff on my own. So I would show up at a gig and I'd set up all my gear. And after I had it all set up, some guy would come up and go, "Oh, this is cool. Who set this up for you?"
Or wait, can I help you get it the way it should be?
Exactly. Or I would go to an electronics store or a music store, and I would ask for a particular thing. I need a 1/4-inch connector that's this and this or that, you know. And they would be, "Well, what are you going to use it for?" Which was like, basically they assumed I probably didn't know what I was doing, and maybe I might be buying the wrong thing, you know. And so that used to happen all the time. Also, whenever I was on a compilation album of electroacoustic composers or whatever, I would generally be the only woman on it, and probably the only person of color on it as well. And that is simply, I mean, it's certainly still is a heavily sort of white male dominated field, the field that I'm in, but it's much less so than it used to be. And in some cases, women have really taken the lead. Like, you know, I noticed at one point that people who were doing live performance with like, especially with voice and processing, but sometimes with other instruments and processing, that women were the leaders in that for a long time, you know. So that was that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I've noticed that people are much more, I mean, I think it happened for women before it happened for people of color. But like, you know, festivals, you can look at the roster of who's performing, especially like in my situation, like, so I'm on the steering committee of the San Francisco Electronic Music Festival. I was one of the founders of it. And actually the founder of it is a woman of color as well, Miyamasa Oka. And we started this festival 20 years ago And Mia sort of like assembled a bunch of us and said, let's do this festival. And we put together a steering committee. And we had been producing this electronic music festival for 20 years. I'm the only sort of lifer, it seems, like all the other people, including Mia, that were on the original, founding steering committee are gone. But I'm still there, and it's a bunch of new people. But I'm proud to say that of all the electronic music festivals in the world, ours is, except for ones that are, women's festivals, or, ours, I would say, has consistently been the most diverse and the most balanced, gender-wise, right. Especially. Right. And so if you look at the list of artists who played on the San Francisco Electronic Music Festival, you'll see just as many women there as men. But if you look at all the other electronic music festivals in the world, you'll see that it's not so. It's still, they are all having some women now, but, it's still,
Thank you for listening to For Good Measures Da Capo Conversations, and a special thank you to our guests for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button, and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measures produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times, and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts, and tune in next week for Good Measure.